It's not entirely clear in this song what James Brown is so upset about, but he does want payback. He does want revenge, and that is what we're going to be talking about today. Specifically, the idea, I think most of us think of ourselves as people who are not inclined towards revenge. But then if you really started to inventory your thoughts, or at least my thoughts over the course of a day, maybe you'd come to doubt that maybe revenge is more of a feature and less of a bug. But we're going to find that out today with our guest, James Kimmel Jr., lawyer, author, assistant clinical professor of psychiatry at the Yale School of Medicine, and the founder and co-director of the Yale Collaborative for Motive Control Studies. His new book is The Science of Revenge, Understanding the World's Deadliest Addiction and How to Overcome It. So first of all, James Kimmel, welcome to our show.
Thanks, Colin. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Okay, we're going to begin just with a specific moment in our recent history. We're going to play a little clip for you and then talk a little bit about how you hear that and process that. A1, Maestro.
Just over 9 years ago, Americans were united in grief after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Now, Americans are united in celebration after the killing of al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden, the mastermind of those atrocities.
And, you saw all those celebrations and interviews with individual people within the celebrations. It was the happiest party you ever saw, which even at that time did strike me as a little strange. Like, I got it, but I also didn't necessarily understand that level of celebration. But I think you would have a way of explaining that to me very effectively.
The Osama bin Laden killing has two explanations, I think. One is to the extent that bin Laden continued to pose a threat to America, right? So that he's an actual imminent threat of killing Americans. Then America is acting in self-defense to try and protect itself from someone who not only has sworn to try and kill Americans, but has shown himself to be very effective in doing so. Self-defense is not revenge-seeking. Self-defense is protecting yourself from an imminent threat of serious harm to yourself or people that you care about. And that's activating the amygdala part of your brain, the fight, flight, and flee instinct, and it's super fast. So self-defense, good. We need it. We've evolved to have that instinct, and we need it to survive. On the other hand, another way of looking at the killing of Osama bin Laden is that he didn't pose a threat any longer. He had been hunted for maybe 10 years. The killing was completely extrajudicial. It didn't seem like he presented a threat at the moment of his death, as I recall, and I hope I'm recalling correctly, to the soldiers who could have potentially arrested him, but they eradicated him instead. They executed him. And that would be punishing somebody for wrongs of the past, inflicting pain upon them because they've done something to hurt or victimize you and caused you pain. That is revenge seeking. And that's a very different story. That activates an entirely different part of our brains. That activates actually the pleasure and reward circuitry of the brain that's associated with addiction. So your brain on revenge looks like your brain on drugs in brain scan studies.
Yeah, and we've walked straight into the premise of your book, or one of the major premises of your book. Yeah, I mean, it's not the first one. It's not that we've become safer. That's not because people don't flood into Times Square and other major, gathering points around America, cheering and happy every time we've signed an arms treaty or something.
Yeah.
This is about somebody did something to us, and we were not going to feel collectively right until something happened to him. And this thing in particular kind of had to happen to him, and then it was experienced as joy. And that does get right into your premise. So let's say a little bit more about this. I mean, you've stated it perfectly. One of the things you talk about, particularly in the first half of the book, is, as you say, that revenge is experienced when you look at the brain, when you look at fMRIs and other kinds of ways of studying the brain and its reactions. Revenge, seems to produce at least a momentary pleasure. And that momentary pleasure looks an awful lot like other kinds of addiction. Without getting too hyper-technical with us, I mean, say a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So when you experience a grievance, and we define a grievance as a real or imagined perception of being wronged, mistreated, treated unfairly or unjustly, humiliated, shamed, betrayed, victimized in just about any way that you can imagine. And we all experience these things, great and small, almost daily throughout our lives. But when we experience these types of grievances, they activate this area of the brain that is considered the brain's pain network, the anterior insula. So the brain is feeling even psychological victimization and pain as physical pain inside the brain, and the brain doesn't want that pain. It's out of balance. It's got more pain than it needs. It's out of homeostasis, and so it wants to rebalance itself. And to do that, it turns out, in brain scan studies over the last 20 years, shockingly, that what neuroscientists find when you put somebody in a brain scanner with a grievance and give them an opportunity to retaliate, is that this activates the pleasure and reward circuitry of addiction. That is to say, your nucleus accumbens and dorsal striatum, these two areas of the brain that are very dopamine rich, and we get dopamine pleasure the same way that a drug addict or an alcoholic gets pleasure from their habit of choice, or a gambling addict. Other behavioral addictions all seem to tread in this same familiar pathway of dopamine pleasure that surges and then it drops. And when the dopamine drops, that gives us this experience of craving. We want that pleasure again. And it forms into, in the physical world, it forms into motivation, our desire to now go out and gratify this craving. And what is the craving for? It turns out the craving is to inflict pain upon the person who wronged you or their proxy. That's what the brain is seeking, is that experience, either real or imagined, because we do a lot of revenge fantasies in our lives. We have a lot of revenge ideation. We keep it inside our heads most of the time.
Yeah, can we pause on that, James? Can we pause on that? Because I think that's important. There's a great quote from Freud in your book. He says that every day, oh no, I'm in the wrong place. But he says that every day, basically in our brain, I got it now. In our unconscious, we daily and hourly do away with all those who stand in our way, all those who have insulated or harmed us. This is the revenge ideation you're talking about right now. I think a lot of people listening to this show are thinking, well, that's not me. I've never exacted revenge in some kind of physical way that I can remember on somebody who had wronged me. But we're doing it all day long in some cases. We're just not, it's all just staying in the theater of our mind, is one of your terms.
Right. And I really phrase it as, the courtroom of the mind, and that we all have a kind of a mental courtroom. And for some of us, this courtroom has a docket that's just filled to overflowing with people who we believe have done things wrong to us. And we're almost endlessly, as Freud describes there, kind of putting people on trial and playing all the roles ourselves. We're the victim, we're the defendant, we're the judge and jury, we're the warden, we're the executioner. I mean, we're doing all of this on a constant. And that can include anything from a dispute with your intimate partner or your child or your parent to bullying on playgrounds, all the way up through intimate partner violence, street and gang violence, police brutality, mass shootings, violent extremism, terrorism, genocide, and war. Studies, public health data, behavioral studies, and criminological data all show that the desire for revenge, that revenge seeking, is the kind of universal one motive for almost all forms of human violence. And now, over the last 20 years, neuroscience is showing us why that's so and how that happens. And it turns out that we're seeking pleasure to make ourselves feel better. But this pleasure, this dopamine hit, this transitory dopamine hit that doesn't last long, merely covers up the pain. It doesn't stay long, and it doesn't stop the pain. So we're usually left feeling worse, but wanting more after our revenge-seeking actions.
We should say that for you, This is both something that you've thought about in a very generalistic way and sometimes in an abstract way, but it's also something that's just a very much directly a part of your life story. Before you explain why that is, I'm sure you're getting tired of telling this very sad story, but I do want to say, some of the stuff we're going to talk about today on the show may be, as they say, triggering. If you or someone you know is in a crisis, call or text the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you've seen the movie John Wick, then you're probably prepared for the story you're about to hear, or maybe there's no way to prepare for this story. But James, give us a sense of how this has kind of touched your life pretty early on.
Yeah, for me, I was my family moved, my brother and I, as kids, when I was 12 years old, out to my great grandfather's farm in the country. And when I got to that place, this was from a really small sort of suburban little home. I wanted to befriend my neighboring kids that were on farms near us. So the neighboring farm kids, they were on these massive dairy farms, and their folks made their living from those farms. My dad was an insurance agent. We were kind of interlopers in that sense, right? We were just entering into this world. And when I reached out to befriend all these guys, they weren't having it, and they didn't want me to come into their space for whatever their reasons were. And I wasn't going to be deterred, so I tried to, continue to do things that would win them over, and that wasn't working. And eventually, they moved on from shunning me to bullying me, and the bullying, as I got older, went from nasty words and comments and shunning things, social isolation in school and getting on and off the school bus, to physical forms of bullying, like, shoving, kicking, hitting, and punching. I'd say, minor levels of violence, until I was about 16 or 17 years old, that is. And late one night, my family, we were all asleep at night, and we were awakened to the sound of a gunshot. Ran to the windows, looked outside to see what was happening. And I saw this pickup truck, now owned by, or driven at least by, one of the guys that had been bullying and harassing me for all of these years. And that truck just, took off away from our house down the road. So we looked around the house to see if there was any damage to windows or anything. Nobody was hurt. We didn't see any damage. We went back to bed. The next morning, one of my jobs before going to school was to go out and take care of our animals. And my grandfather and I really tended a small herd of Black Angus cattle that we had, and we had some pigs and chickens and things like that. We also had a sweet beagle, a hunting dog that our family used to hunt with. And when I went up to her pen to feed and water her that morning, I found her unfortunately lying dead in a pool of blood with a bullet hole in her head.
So that obviously, first of all, I want to say, as a dog owner and someone who's very attached to his dog, that would set me off too. I'm not exactly sure what I would do if somebody killed my dog. But this, you did, your initial reaction was the kind of thing that you've been talking about since we started the show right now. And you got a gun and had it in your car, as I recall. What happened? How come you wound up not acting on this, not getting that kind of revenge? What happened?
It was like so there's a 2-week gap. 2 weeks later, they came back, staged a second attack on our house, blew up our mailbox. And that's, in the night when my folks were not at home. We had plenty of guns from hunting. My dad had a loaded revolver in a nightstand. I grabbed it, ran outside, jumped in my mother's car, and I chased after them that night. And I cornered them by one of their barns. And so, the scene there is, their pickup truck is sort of jammed against a barn wall, and they're, slowly climbing out of the truck, 3 or 4 of them, and facing into my bright beams of my car and trying to figure out who had just come charging down their road. And I had the gun, and I could tell a couple of things. One was they weren't armed; they had nothing in their hands, at least, and they couldn't have known that I had a gun. And I started this. I opened the door and started to get out of the car. And at that moment, I just had this really quick insight that if I went through with what I wanted, which was to finally get back at them and deliver the payback that James Brown talks about in his song at the beginning of this show, if I went through with that, I'd have, the guy who drove onto their farm would never be the same again. I'd have to identify myself as a killer. And that wasn't an identity that I could accept. It wasn't who I knew myself in my heart to be. And so I stopped at the last second, pulled myself back in the car, put the gun back down, and drove home. So I came, within seconds of committing a really serious, life-changing, life-ending, potentially, act of violence for me and those guys. But it wasn't as though I forgave them at that point. I just knew that the cost of getting the revenge I wanted was higher than I was willing to pay.
Yeah, and some ways,
I came up with a weird solution for that.
Go ahead. Yeah, I was going to say that in some ways, a lot of your book is about these centers of the brain that either say stop or say go. You managed to activate your stop at that moment when a lot of your brain was saying go. And in a way, it's very predictive of the kind of work that you've done. Just to make sure we don't run out of time before we get to some of these other points, I just want to also, another part of your autobiography is about being a trial lawyer, a litigator, somebody who's going after other people on behalf of clients. But, when I think of revenge and reading this book and thinking about revenge, there is a legitimate blurring of justice and revenge. You end the book with the Potsdam Accords, but I also noted that I think it's either out right now or it's coming out in 2 days. There's another movie about Nuremberg coming out. And you think about Nuremberg, I think to most people, the Nuremberg trials were an attempt to seek justice, to balance some kind of scales that were out of balance and to drive home a point about what is acceptable behavior and what is damnable behavior. And I'm not sure that's the same thing as revenge. I mean, at times the two look kind of the same, but how do you parse those distinctions?
Yeah, they are. Revenge is used as a synonym. I'm sorry, justice is used as a synonym for revenge, and justice is also used as a term that means fairness, equity, even love. Social justice means at a minimum, I'm going to treat you like myself. You're a human, I'm a human, we're the same, and you deserve the same rights that I have. That is social justice. And justice in its highest form is this idea of simple equity. On the other hand, because it means that, we get into a mental game, we humans, and we've become very good at it, at calling revenge-seeking justice in order to explain away and accept all of the forms of violence that humans experience and hand out against each other, because in the end, almost all violent people, almost to every last one of them, believes that they were a victim first and they're merely seeking justice for what's happened to them and how they've been wronged. And that means that we're on a endless, slippery slope straight down into revenge seeking. It's the same thing. And we use it to, going back to 9/11, as you started the program, that word, American justice, and we're going to bring the terrorists to justice, is what George Bush promised the country we would do. And what we did in that process was we slaughtered 800,000 people throughout the Afghanistan and Iraq wars in the aftermath of 9/11, all in the name of justice. Is that the justice that we mean when we think of love, equity, and fairness? No, it's not. It's different. But by calling it that, we can cover over and give a green light to and sanctify the most horrific acts of violence that humans are capable of.
We're going to grab a quick break here. I could talk about this for another hour, I promise you. But we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back with James Kimmel Jr. and our conversation about revenge.
It took me 15 years to swallow all my tears among the urchins in the street, until a priory took pity and hired me to keep their vestry nice and neat. But never once in the employ of these holy men did I ever once turn my mind from the thought of revenge.
You keep saying you got something for me, something you call love, but confess you've been a messin' where you shouldn't have been a messin', and now someone else is getting all your best. These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days, these boots are gonna walk all over you.
That, of course, is the great Nancy Sinatra. You know, doing this whole show, getting ready for this whole show with James Kimball Jr. here to talk about his new book, The Science of Revenge, Understanding the World's Deadliest Addiction and How to Overcome It. I became aware of just how much of our culture is about revenge. How many of our movies, how many of our streaming television series, how many Taylor Swift songs there are that are just about getting revenge. And so, actually, before I ask you a question, let's kind of play an example of this. So in Game of Thrones, the character of Arya Stark, the daughter of Ned Stark, becomes a person so obsessed with revenge that in order to go to sleep at night, she recites the names of people that she feels that she has to kill in order to have any kind of peace of mind, any kind of sense that the world is a just and balanced place. Let's hear a little bit of how this sounds. A3, please.
Cersei, Walder Frey, Meryn Trant, Tywin Lannister, the Red Woman, Beric Dondarrion, Thoros of Myr, Ilyn Payne, the Mountain.
Would you shut up?
I can't sleep until I say the names.
The names of every person in Westeros.
Only the ones I'm going to kill.
It's as good a thing as any to keep a person going.
That's the Hound saying the latter statement. And so, James, when we're watching something like that, or you write about The Lion King in your book, there's really little question about what most of us are rooting for. We are rooting for revenge. We are rooting for Arya to kill all those people. We are rooting for The Lion King, which is kind of a retelling of Hamlet, but with animals. We root for revenge a lot of the time. And there's sort of a chicken-egg question here, right? Do we root for revenge because we're wired to do it? Do we root for revenge because we are getting culturally programmed by our media to do it? Or actually, are they doing that because they already know it's going to work?
So the answer there is we're wired to want revenge. And evolutionary psychologists believe that revenge was an adaptive strategy that humanity adopted as early as the Pleistocene epoch, the Ice Age. And so we all want revenge, almost 100% of us. Population studies have been made asking people, have you had any revenge thoughts recently? And almost 100% of people in those surveys say yes. Whereas if they're asked, have you acted on those revenge thoughts, only about 20% of people do, which aligns with the number of people who experiment, for instance, with drugs or alcohol and actually become addicted to them, only about 20%. So it seems as though revenge seeking that becomes compulsive. First of all, revenge is natural and there's nothing wrong with feeling that. We all feel it. But when you can't resist the urge to take an act of revenge despite the negative consequences, it moves from a natural feeling into a pathological state, a diseased state in which you have an addiction to this brain biological pleasure that you're getting, and that you will potentially eventually start contriving even ways to feel aggrieved so that you get more and more opportunities to get these dopamine hits and experiment with them. Before we go on, though, I just want to say, in relation to that clip, it's eerily similar to what Joseph Stalin admitted saying as a young man long before he became the premier of the Soviet Union, and he said his greatest pleasure in life was to think about slaking an implacable thirst for revenge against someone who had wronged him before going to bed at night. So it's as if they took it right from his quote.
Yeah, and so, in our own politics, although occasionally these things have been spoken aloud, these thoughts have been spoken aloud, there's been historically a kind of forced geniality about things. People lose elections, they give concession speeches, they congratulate the person who beat them in elections. They may also call the person directly to congratulate the person. With Nixon, it was never entirely plausible that he meant any of those kinds of things to whatever degree he said them. But we really have sort of come to a very odd pass here with a person who is now, for the second time, our president, who just seems like he should have a whole chapter in your book, James. Let's just hear a little bit of how Donald Trump sounds B2.
I will appoint a real special prosecutor to go after the most corrupt president in the history of the United States of America, Joe Biden, and the entire Biden crime family.
And, of course, we've gone from there to James Comey and Letitia James and yada, yada, just to add the names. So if we're going to talk about this as a kind of addiction, do we have an addicted person running this country right now?
Yeah, so I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, and I've never met him and can't diagnose an addiction in the true medical sense. But I think that when you look at Donald Trump's own words, he was willing to say and base his candidacy on the premise that he would become the retribution for those who voted for him. He would take their grievances and he would avenge them and become the ultimate avenger. And that seems to be what he's done as president. But his and he seems to enjoy it, right? I mean, it seems to be a lot of pleasure that seems to be expressed by him and the people around him that he's assembled that are this team of Avengers, the real life Avengers, in effect. And so it does appear as though there's a lot of revenge seeking for pleasure in the White House. But I want to emphasize that's not unique in any way, either in this country or around the world. And it's not unique to conservatives versus liberals. Liberals are every bit as vengeful as conservatives and have been throughout history. And so it is a true human problem, revenge seeking and revenge addiction in particular. It is not a political problem. Revenge knows no political boundaries.
We should also say that he does not exist independently from our current media environment, which is dominated by social media, which is rigged up basically in order to, nominally to increase engagement. But engagement seems to be that kind of limbic response of a snake that's being stepped on and wants to bite. And as somebody who's on social media, a lot of the day, I'm very aware of that there's the cycle of aggression and revenge or of feeling wronged and seeking revenge. It gets down to a matter of seconds as opposed to days or months or years, right? We're just sort of cycling through that all day long.
Well, what makes social media so attractive and so compelling and causes user engagement is that they've created a very addictive platform, and humanity was unprepared for it when it was unveiled. So social media platforms, it turns out, are excellent at allowing people to spread a grievance, real or imagined sense of victimization, to millions of people at the same time at light speed. So you've got millions of people with a shared grievance targeting the same potential wrongdoer, the person who committed the grievance or the wrong. And the platform also gives instantaneous revenge gratification by allowing people to target that person, the target of the revenge seeking, instantaneously as well. So you get immediate grievance creation, immediate grievance spread at more rapidly than pandemic speed. And then you allow people immediate revenge gratification. Having stirred the desire for revenge, we give them an instantaneous opportunity to experience revenge gratification by retaliating against those people who they believe are opposite them, who have wronged them. And the platform goes one step further. It even allows people to plot and plan real life revenge seeking acts on the platform. So it's an ingenious, addictive platform, and what the algorithms cause it to be this way. It's very dangerous for humanity right now, and we didn't know it was coming. And we also at that time didn't know about revenge addiction the way we do now.
Yeah, it's become like a casino of revenge, and now it's just like, well, we didn't like the way that woman handled the foul ball situation where she argued with the father about let's destroy this woman. So we should just talk really briefly. I want to save time for the silver lining here, and there really is one, by the way. But this in national form, this takes the shape of what we sometimes call revanchism, this idea that there are political movements based on the idea. It's sort of national honor, a blanket of national honor wrapped around the pig of revenge, that they took the Falkland Islands or Alsace-Lorraine or the Crimean Peninsula away from us. And the entire purpose of my political movement is to redress that wrong. And so is this... I mean, that's the way they would say it. We need to redress a wrong. I'm assuming you think that's just revenge as a national political movement.
Well, that's what redressing a wrong means. So yes, it is revenge, quite rightly so. And that is an extraordinarily effective way to get votes, is to provide people with a grievance or identify a grievance they have and magnify it, and then position yourself as the party or the person who is going to retaliate on your behalf and right things again, to deliver the payback and then restore ourselves to some prior state of supposed happiness. And again, this crosses all political boundaries. Both sides or all sides in the case of multi-party systems do it.
So let's talk about the other side of this coin, and I'll begin the conversation with another clip. This is from the movie Gandhi, in which Ben Kingsley played Gandhi in 1982. And the scene you're going to hear, a Hindu man has come to Gandhi's bedside, where I think he might actually be on a hunger strike to try to make the hostilities between the Hindus and the Muslims settle down. And this Hindu man comes and tells his story. B1.
I killed a child. I smashed his head against a wall.
Why?
They killed my son. My boy. The Muslims killed my son.
I know a way out of hell. Find a child whose mother and father have been killed. A little boy about this high, and raise him as your own. Only be sure that he is a Muslim, and that you raise him as one.
So this is radical forgiveness. Gandhi is suggesting to this Hindu man whose child has been killed by Muslims that the only way out of hell is to do this radical thing, to adopt a parentless child who's a Muslim and raise him as a Muslim. I thought about that. That stayed with me forever. And when reading your book, I thought about that too, because one of the things you explore is a way out of hell, to use Gandhi's phrase, that there is a different way of thinking about this, and that at the level of human neurology, it's probably more permanently or durably rewarding than what we've been talking about for the whole show.
Yes, that is such a powerful clip and a perfect clip to illustrate what we've been talking about on all sides of it, the revenge side, and then now the remedy for it. So understanding revenge seeking as an addictive process, we can bring to bear what we've developed over the last 40 years, normal addiction prevention and treatment strategies, everything from 12-step programs to certain anti-craving medications and cognitive behavioral therapy and things like that. But at the same time that neuroscientists around the world were studying people who have a grievance and a desire for revenge inside a brain scanner, they also began studying people who have a grievance and are given an opportunity to simply imagine forgiveness. And here's what happens inside your brain when you do that. And you called it radical forgiveness. And I have to say, it's not radical. We are hardwired to forgive. And here is exactly what it does. So the first thing that happens when you imagine forgiving a grievance, even if you never speak to the person who wronged you, you never offer them forgiveness verbally or in any other way, you don't stay in a toxic relationship, you simply do this as an internal decision. That decision causes that pain network, the anterior insula where the grievance is housed, the pain center, it causes it to stop. Instead of just covering up pain with a temporary taste of dopamine from revenge fantasies or revenge seeking, forgiveness actually shuts down the pain network. The other thing that it does is it shuts down the pleasure and reward circuitry of addiction, the go circuitry, and therefore the nucleus accumbens and the dorsal striatum, they also become silent. The third thing that forgiveness does inside your brain is it activates or reactivates the prefrontal cortex, your executive function and self-control circuitry. So it has these amazing neurobiological benefits that actually have nothing to do with spirituality. I mean, the forgiveness has been long associated with spirituality, or it's been associated with softness. You can be an inveterate atheist, and you can benefit from all of these aspects of revenge seeking, and a lot of physiological ones as well, like reduced blood pressure, improved sleeping, improved immune system function as well. So it's an amazing wonder drug that we have kind of long since ignored and misunderstood, and it's time now to see it for what it does.
Yeah, and one reason I said radical is because it's Gandhi, and he's in the middle of a war, and he's suggesting this thing that I think a lot of people would find hard to do. And I think what's really interesting about what you lay out in the chapters of the book related to this is that a lot of us might be tempted to go, well, he's Gandhi. I can't do that. And you're saying, no, this is something that really is available to pretty much everybody who wants to try to get there.
Yeah, it's wired inside our brains. We all can do it. And it isn't nearly as hard as it seems. One of the quick ways of kind of experiencing that really rapidly, like at this second, is if you can imagine a grievance that you have, wherever you are. If it's safe to do, you could close your eyes. But if you imagine that grievance, and now just imagine forgiving it. Don't forgive it. You don't have to talk to the other person. You don't even make a decision to forgive. Just imagine, how would I feel if I decided to forgive it right now? And this gives an instant, and people who've done this repeatedly, we find the words that they express are, I would feel like this burden coming off of my shoulders, this weight off my chest. I would feel relief, because it's sort of astonishing to think, I don't have to actually seek to punish this person and inflict pain upon them. I could just move on. And we have to remember, we become responsible for our own brains. Remember, revenge is about punishing people for wrongs of the past. That means the past, they don't exist in the real world. You can't experience the wrongs that you're having revenge cravings over at all. They're just thought formations inside your brain that are called memories. And the desire for revenge is only a thought formation. It doesn't have to become manifest in this world. But when you forgive it, you stop that thought formation from continuing to replicate, and you put it behind you so that you can move forward into the present and the future. And, without this pain of the traumas of the past ruining your life.
We're going to have to stop there, but that means there's an awful lot more for you to absorb. I would really suggest sticking your nose into the book, The Science of Revenge, Understanding the World's Deadliest Addiction and How to Overcome It. James Kimmel Jr., lawyer, author, assistant clinical professor of psychiatry at Yale School of Medicine. Thanks so much for being with us today. We're going to take a quick break, and we will come back. We will talk about how revenge is depicted in fiction.
Smile.
Time to say a few quick words of thanks. The first is to the maestro, Dylan Reyes, our technical producer today and most days. This is an offering from Lily Tyson Quality Entertainment Productions. Lily Tyson, CEO. We thank her very much for being our senior producer, for putting this episode together. We're going to turn to the realms of literature here at the end of our show with Emily King, visiting assistant professor of writing and English at Washington Lee University. She is the author of Civil Vengeance, Literature, Culture, and Early Modern Revenge. Emily, I don't think you were around for the end of the last segment, but I was talking to James Kimmel about this idea of transforming your attitudes, of mentally transforming your attitude, your desire for revenge into something else, into some form of forgiveness. And when I was thinking about that, it's not really a revenge story, but I was thinking of Dickens's Scrooge, who it's more disappointment than revenge that he's dealing with. But he just goes through his entire life dominated by those things, and it turns him into this highly unpleasant person. And for once, I mean, there's a lot of revenge in Dickens novels, but mostly it's people who just can't get past, all of their bad feelings. It's just very interesting that he does have this very transformative thing where Scrooge just gets better, right?
That's a wonderful reading. Part of the way that Scrooge gets better, of course, is through the implicit threat of the future, of what that future holds. And so what we have is the threat of vengeance in order to extract a more pro-social, better attitude. And we see this in a variety of revenge fiction, whether we're looking at Jane Eyre, Moments There, Wuthering Heights, who can forget, of course, in Little Women, Amy March's burning of Joe's diaries and short stories. I think many of us have still not forgiven Amy for that. As a Shakespearean and an early modern dramatist, I spend a lot of time with this strange genre that predates Dickens and is called revenge tragedy genre. These are plays that focus on a critical act of injustice that cannot be remedied through regular legal or political channels. We have avengers dithering and weighing the sort of consequences legally, ethically, morally, religiously. We often encounter avengers who either succumb to or feign madness. And at the end of it, we see avengers who, through this act, die essentially by suicide. And if that sounds familiar, and I should add to supernatural elements of ghostly dads and such, if that sounds familiar, of course, it's because Shakespeare's Hamlet is that revenge play par excellence. And I think even with plays that focus on revenge and would seem to endorse it, there's a lot to learn about in terms of revenge, forgiveness, or even possibilities for a radical social orientation, as we see in sort of Scrooge's metamorphosis.
Yeah, hold that thought for a second. I just want to say for the second time in the show today, just, some of this stuff that we're going to talk about is, as they say, triggering. If you or someone you know is in crisis, call or text the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Do you want to see a little bit more about a lot that we can learn from? I mean, when I watch a staging of Hamlet, I don't know if I'm entirely clear about what I'm supposed to learn from it. It gets, first of all, performed and staged a lot of different ways with other potential lessons to it. But if we're going to derive personal meaning from something like that, how do we do that?
That's a great question. So I think there's always lots to learn in terms of revenge literature and that genre. And it depends on performance and how these lines are played. I would say more broadly about the genre, it extends to us a caution and an invitation. By caution, I mean, we know in the conversation you had with James and even our current political moment, the ways that the narrative of revenge can be weaponized against minoritized individuals. And in that weaponization, one legitimizes the poor pathological behavior towards them. So if you construct or make someone into a boogeyman, you can predictably treat them in that sort of way. So revenge reminds us of the need to pay attention to political structures and frameworks. With the second part of what we can learn from revenge, I'd consider it an invitation. And what we have, certainly with, of course, Hamlet's melancholia that's trailing him throughout that play, but in other revenge plays, such as the Spanish Tragedy by Thomas Kyd, which in fact inaugurates this genre, it's an invitation into the unbearable emotions that we so often have to sit and metabolize on our own. It might beggar belief, but to consider revenge as an attempt to convey, through at times violent actions, the interiority that is unbearable, the rage, the grief, the sorrow that is, we can plumb those depths. At the conclusion to the Spanish tragedy, we have a father who has lost his son to murder, and he affects revenge and makes fellow fathers feel his pain. The reason I'm belaboring this is to suggest that we consider with some of these Avengers an attempt to communicate what they're feeling as a kind of forced empathy, right? That revenge seems antisocial, but it might also be a way to communicate really difficult feelings. It's an invitation to the kind of hellish interiority before we can perhaps move towards something like radical forgiveness.
Yeah, I think also, I'm taking you out of the early modern period, dragging you hundreds of years forward.
Okay.
But I think even in sort of in romanticism, you think about Ahab. When you were just talking right now, I started thinking about Ahab, because it doesn't really make any sense to be that mad at a whale. Except that he's expressing some of the interiority that you're talking about. I think there's just a lot of rage inside people, and it just so happened he lost a leg to a whale. So it's going to be about that. But it's almost if, in the way that you're talking, the whale is kind of incidental. The rage is the thing.
Absolutely. And particularly when we're thinking about questions of masculinity that are often bound up with honor and a kind of stoic control over emotions, that revenge becomes the vehicle for those difficult, unmanageable, unmetabolized emotions. So I really appreciate you dragging me into the future a little bit with that example.
I could drag you a little even further to Inigo Montoya in The Princess Bride, who walks around saying, "My name is Inigo Montoya, you killed my father, prepare to die." Now, I think William Goldman, the writer of that, he fails to, we really need to know how does Inigo feel after all this is over? I feel like it's not going to fix anything, but we don't get that lesson.
We don't get that lesson, but even with that moment, which will make my spouse so happy when he hears this later, there's a particular fixation on the injury. It's as if, whether it's revenge plays or very popular 1980s movies, folks have to remind themselves of their purpose as if they might forget it. And that speaks to the ways that revenge, the orientation may not in fact be natural, whatever that might mean, that you have to work at it. You have to carry around the skull, say the thing, carry around the bloody handkerchief and so forth in order to see that act forward.
We're going to have to stop there, but Emily King, you were made to be a guest on this show, and when you say that to your spouse tonight, your spouse will probably say, "Inconceivable," but it's still true, and thanks for being with us. This has been our show about revenge. I hope you walk away from this with a slightly different set of feelings about that whole idea, and thanks once again to Lily Tyson for producing.
They think she did it, but they just can't prove it. They think she did it, but they just can't prove it. She thinks I did it, but she just can't prove it. No, nobody, no crime. I wasn't letting